Hello and welcome. Welcome. I know, great A. Welcome to this weird impromptu how to make map. How to make map. Alright. So I've just opened up Hammer, and what I'll do is I'll do a full screen capture properly. Because someone asked me on Steam, someone asked me a question like, how do you actually make a map? And this is more like, it felt like when I asked them stuff, they weren't really talking about the theory, the big brain design concepts, none of that stuff. It's just more like, how do you actually physically do it inside of the editor? So I'm using Hammer++, which is what you can download online. It's easy enough to find. It's just an enhanced version of Hammer, which comes with the game. And I don't know how much I'm going to do other than just maybe go through some of the stuff like buttons and things, and how exactly does it all work, right? So hopefully I'm not blocking too much here. The first thing is, okay, I can make a new map, right? I've got this stuff here. I can close this up here in the top right. I'm going to presume if I just do new, I get this, which just shows me the 3D view. To switch between it, you just click the camera, and that means that allows you, if you left click on it, you can look around. Wow! And you can use WASD to move around, just like if you were moving about in game. Fantastic. But this is not really the view that you want, right? Because while you can edit stuff in 3D, and you get to do that inside of this editor versus the original Hammer, you can't really do much in 3D view editing. So I will press Control A, and Control A will show all of the views, and usually you'll want to use something like top or something like that. UI looks similar to Doom Builder. That's because, well, at the end of the day, Hammer is based off Hue Radiant, which is based off the Quake editor, which is based off the Doom editor, right? It's all kind of sits in a line, and you can kind of like look down that line all the way to the Doom editor. What's next? What would I want to do? These buttons all along the top. I will say this with any piece of software. You look at all of this and you're like, oh no, this is there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff. Why am I going to use this? There's stuff down here on the right. What is all this for? All this stuff on the left. There's so many things. Like Photoshop, like 3D Max, like Blender, whatever you use, you realize you use basically none of the buttons or like 3 of them, and that's all you'll want to use. And then everything else, like a lot of these things are like toggles about showing things like visually. Stuff down here are tools on the left side, but again, a lot of them you never really use, other than I would say selection tool and camera is what you'd be clicking the most, because you need to click the camera button in order to, move around here. And you'll use the selection tool to actually do stuff, move things about. Now here's the thing, even though if you have the camera view and you're pressing like WASD to move around, it does mean you got to click the camera button. But I find it sometimes in a pinch, if I'm just in this editor, if I click in here, I can actually use the arrow keys to move around, and WASD as well. So it is possible to move around without having to click the camera button. The camera button just gives you this nice way to move the camera around. This is the camera in the 2D view, but again, you will not need this really. This is just a very, like, it's too much. It's too much. All right, so what's the first thing you would want to do with a map? You probably just want to like make a box, I guess. So what you would want to do down here is, here's the two main tools to making things inside of your map. You've got your block tool, which makes, you guessed it, blocks. And the entity tool is, well, to create entities. So point entities, things like lights, player starts, sounds, all of that stuff. That all comes from there. All right. Again, the thing with this is that you'll not really use these much, because what you'll end up doing is creating a block, and then you just basically copy and paste that block like hundreds of times, thousands of times maybe, you know? So just like anything. Hey, Nexus. Right. There's other useful things. You've got a texture application thing, which allows you to select which texture you want to use on, say, for a block, if you're going to make it. But you will remember Shift A. Shift A also does that. And you can do this, right? This, it's again, like any program, you can either click this, you can use this up here in the top right, this is the same thing, or you could use Shift A. It's all the same thing. You know that this is the thing in the top right because it pops out basically. And this allows you to do like more interesting stuff in terms of like how you apply the texture and what texture you want to select. But you can do things very basically. If I just search for, so this is all of the textures, right? I can search for things, right, if I want to. Keywords just allows you to find like things that are grouped under the same like mod, for example. So thankfully when you do a Team Fortress 2 map, generally TF is automatically selected, but just make sure that you do TF. I think if you do HL, this might give you Half-Life. Nope. It might not, because it doesn't have all the Half-Life textures in this, right? You could search for tool, but generally speaking, you want TF. TF is like all of the textures in the Team Fortress space, right? That's what you want. Instead, use the filter to find the textures that you want. Say you want a brick texture, you'll find all of the brick textures here, right? You can change the size if you want to make it smaller. I usually like it kind of big. You can also click the only use textures. That will find all the textures that are being used currently inside the map. So that's pretty good. Brick textures, yes, brick textures. You can search for dev, for example, and this will give you a bunch of dev textures, or you can search for tool textures, and that will give you a bunch of tool textures. I can go on about the tool textures. Maybe this is a little note, but when you apply a texture to a block, tool textures can have automatic entity application to something that has this texture. For example, if I apply player clip texture to a block, it will become a player clip block. It will not become a real block. It's automatically assigned the entity because I covered the block in this texture. You can manually assign it using the entity tool, but it's sort of like a nice to have. It's a quality of life type thing, you could say. But if I'm going to make a quick map, I'm going to just use a dev texture. You don't need to use a dev texture. You see everyone being like, I'm really developing a level, I've made a dev texture, or I'm using a dev texture. Seriously, the first couple of levels that I've done before, and some of the stuff that's actually in the game, I literally use like a basic concrete texture, right? It's whatever works for you at the end of the day, right? I'm just going to use a simple dev grid texture. And this means that when I make a block, it will use this texture. So I will click block tool and I will select, click and drag, and either you can create the object, but a nice and easy way is to press enter. Enter will make that block. All right. Now, if I want to do anything with the block, I can. I'll have to go back to selection tool, but here's the thing, you're probably in selection tool 99% of the time. All right. So I've made the block. The issue here is that this is a really big grid. It's on 64 grid size, which might be too big. But if you're making a big blocky map, a block out, like an initial idea of a level, this is probably fine. The sense of scale is maybe something you're not quite sure of right now. See, I can use the arrow keys here to move around quickly. Arrow keys to look around in WASD, to move and pan forward and things like that, right? If I don't really care about being like, oh, I want to really look around with the mouse, sometimes you will find that you might want to do that, but you don't always need to worry about that. All right, so I got this big old block. Let's use the texture that I've selected, and you can see it in all of this stuff. So a lovely little thing, a shortcut to use right now is Control E. Control E will center that selection in all views, as you can see. And if you hold Control while you mouse wheel, it will zoom everything out at the same amount. Isn't that lovely? Middle mouse to pan, mouse wheel to zoom in and out. So here's the thing. I'm going to, you can see here, right in the grid, this blue line is your origin axis, your X and Y axis. So I might just want to say, let's say I'll quickly make a little block right here. Oh, isn't that fantastic? Let me just use the arrows and WASD to move around here. You can see it. You can see the origin here in the map with the axis RGB XYZ. That's how you remember. Red, green, blue, XYZ. It matches because it's in the same order. Wow! Does it matter? Nope. Doesn't matter. But yeah, I've got a block. I'm going to move it down here. As I said, I've got the selection tool. I can move it around. I can scale it up. I can scale it down. So here's a little thing. Here's a little tip, little aside again. It's all going to be asides filled with more asides, filled with more asides. 64, 128 grid size. The grid size is down here. It's behind my avatar, but it does say there. It says snap-on grid 64 by default. 64 is good in terms of like big chunky sizes, but if you're like actually making a level, you will want to bring yourself down to like 16, because 16 is like a good thickness for a wall, right? So like from any of your maps, from like Granary to Dust Bowl or whatever, if you look at the walls of buildings, they will tend to be like 16 units thick. And maybe 8 units thick if you're making like shacks, you know, thin wooden buildings, right? But that's just basically a rule of thumb kind of thing. I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can increase and decrease the grid size with the square brackets, where one reduces it and one increases the size. I'm sure there is a way to change the grid. It's up here, right? Larger grid, smaller grid. So that does the same thing. But again, right, once you know the keyboard shortcut, that helps out. The 3D grid just shows a literal 3D grid on objects. But here's the thing, if you've got a grid texture on it, it's very, very difficult to see because it's kind of the same thing. See, this is why a dev texture, people will use a dev texture, right? Because why turn on and off the grid, the 3D grid, if it's already there? So back to a previous point. What's the scale? I don't understand what the scale is. I am a new person. How big is this block? Is this the size of an entire level? Is this the size of, I don't know, the capture point inside 2.4? I don't know. Well, here's a basic thing. Let's start to use the entity tool. Now, thankfully, you can just click it on here, and this will place it on the block where it hits the surface. And by default, it's a player start. And that will show a little 3D model of a player start, which will give you an idea of how big the map is. So here you go. Hammer ++ changes it from a little Gordon Freeman model to an engineer model. And you can see here this beautiful boy. And that allows you to see, hey, how big is this level? How big does it feel? Now you have a sense of scale. So an entity is used to make an object, right? I can Control Z to block it. If I place it in here, it more asks for like, oh, where exactly do you want to place it before allowing you to place it. You can right click, create object or whatever, but you might want to like change what object it is. You can select it here, entities and prefabs, or don't care about the prefabs. Don't worry about the prefabs. No one does anything like this. You just care about the entities because those are real things. You can select all of these different things. These are, there's lots of stuff, but here's the thing. Most of the complex stuff you'll probably just copy and paste in from an example level. You're going to make like a capture point, you know, a King of the Hill map. You'll probably just copy in the main entities from there and all the logic entities. And much like anything in life with this software, you'll probably use 3 or 4 different entities, and that's about it. And one of that is the player start. Player start, which is what it is by this default, right? Or I should say team player start. The player start is single player, which is why, oh, it's a little garden fella, but that's not what you want. I'll just delete that. With delete, I want team spawn, right? And you can press Alt Enter, and this allows you to actually see the properties of this object. So you can actually change it to something else. If you apply it, you'll see it will change to this power-up spawn, which I think is, what game mode is it? Is it like pastime or something? Apply, error, thankfully. But you might see other things like a health kit medium, for example, apply. So this allows you to see, hey, what are all of the entities that you have? You know, like lights or doors or teleports. And lots of other game logic stuff. They are kind of grouped up into like functions, you could say. So anything with env is environment. This means something that's like, well, you can actually look at it there, right? Like a particle or a laser or a glow or a spark or a sprite or the sun. It's anything that affects the environment, like that looks nice or something, right? You place it in your environment to like improve the look of the environment in some way. Filters are things, it's more of a condition type thing, like a logic gate, where you're filtering a type of damage or a type of player to do some other logic with it. This is something that you really will not look at. A func is a function, which is old school, but most of the time I think they've changed it for everything else, right? Func is generally for 3D objects, right? Because these are point entities, right? You gotta remember these. There's these two things. Entities is an object that does some sort of special function, right? A health pack is a point entity with a special function, right? You walk over it, you get health, right? It's some programmed thing. That's a point entity because you create a point in the map and it creates this object. A very common one that you will use is lights and props, right? Like game objects like a wheelbarrow or a door or some roof item that you place on there, or cover or a crate or something like that. They're all props, and those are point entities, so they will all use this sort of stuff. Game stuff is like game logic, and then you have info, which tends to just be like, a lot of these things could be trimmed down, but as I said, you'll probably use like 3 of these. Out of all of these things, you use like 3 or 4 of them with your knowledge, and the rest is like either copy and pasted over. And even then, a lot of these things are just old stuff that isn't used. It's from Half-Life or whatever. Info things tend to be like AI logic. You're not going to use AI, as far as I can tell, unless you're making man versus machine. But even then, that's kind of all generally automatic and automated through a compile. But that's way down the line, like if you're deciding to make an MVM map or whatever. An item, these are just items, right? You can see ammo packs, health packs, power-ups. You can see a lovely health kit there. Logic is logic stuff, and then you've just got some math stuff, again, more logic stuff. And you've got physics things, like physics constraints, if you want to do physics, like a hinge or whatever. But again, you'll probably never use this. And point is just like, because these are all point entities, really, at the end of the day. And these are just other versions of this, where you've got a point message, intermission, hurt. They might have, once you apply it, you'll be able to see some information. It might give you some help if you click help. You can read more about it, but a lot of the cases you'll find that a lot of these things you'll probably never use. Like I was saying, props is another one that you'll probably be using, right? A prop detail, which requires a model, and if I click browse, it will go into this model browser. It looks daunting, but again, this is nothing more different than the texture editor, right? The applicator, where you're just like, give me a list of models versus give me a list of textures. It's exactly the same idea. You're like, I want to place a control point. It's also just not there, apparently. Is it a point? Yeah, cap point, cap underscore point. So sometimes you might have to search for things specifically, but you're like, okay, that's a prop, and I'll apply that. Wow, it's a control point. And I can use the selection tool I can move it around. But again, right, this is very flaky using this method inside here. But you can in Hammer++, it allows you to do that, right? So I can see I've got this prop detail. It's probably better to make this a prop static. So this is probably the one that you'll use the most, prop static. Any sort of object that you'll place in the level that you want to have nice lighting, it's not going to move, It's not going to do anything major, like say like a cray or rocks. You might use it for rock. You'll use it for rocks. I wouldn't say you wouldn't use it for rocks, but that's generally all going to use that. You can press X to flick it between. This is a hammer plus plus thing. To flick it between whether you're using the gizmos or this like in-game, well, not in-game, like the 2D handle method to move things around. If you press X, it will change it to like a more modern method of moving things around in editor view, which is just to give you handles using like the world, what was it called, like the world gizmo or the axis gizmo. So you can pull it along the axis that you want, and obviously you can select in between the axes to move it just along that axis like a pan. You can right click to flick between this, but this is a very hammer plus plus thing. This doesn't exist in regular hammer. It is very nice and allows you to rotate on these axes. It snaps usually by default, but you can hold Alt to turn that off in case you want to do like very, very minute movements. Anything else? Team Fortress is... So this is the same as logic stuff and game stuff. This is just tends to be like you will need one of these or a few of these in order to like set up a game mode that you want to do, right? Because it says logic minigames, logic medieval, logic Koth, right? If you want to do King of the Hill, you probably use this one. Again, like I said before, you'll probably just copy and paste this from an existing level. Existing maps do come with Hammer ++, and they're also in the Team Fortress folder, so you can find them, and there's a few example maps. And as I said, you can just copy and paste it. There's no problem with doing that. You are allowed to do that. You're not less of a mapper because you copy and paste stuff that exists in other maps, especially if it's logic. There's no point reinventing the wheel unless you plan on doing something different with it. But again, you can just edit those things with Alt-Enter, find out what the logic stuff is. It will have all of these settings and you can change them, right? Just a little aside here. I know, more asides. It will be a prop dynamic for a control point, because a dynamic is, okay, it gives you more functionality in movement. It can move around and things like that and change in ways, but it doesn't have as like nice optimized physics. But that's a trade-off that you get. The reason why you have it on capture points is because, well, the capture points, you want to change the color, right, according to who captures it. Again, this is all stuff that you can just copy and paste. It's much easier, especially if you're just going to make a map that already exists with that logic. You're making a control point map, just copy a control point map logic with all of this stuff. So that's that. So I guess the next thing to do is to just go, okay, I'm making a box, I'm making a room, what am I doing? I can scale it up, whatever. Just making a basic room would probably be the best thing. Now this is what I say, I've clicked this once, this block tool once. I've got a block now. I don't need any more blocks. I'm going to just go Control C and Control V and to copy and paste it. And I'm just going to move it, and I'm just going to drag it like that. See, now I have another block. I'm just going to make like a wall, and then I'm going to just copy and paste up here on the top view. What is it? Shift Z? Shift Z allows you to pick a view, Shift Z, and maximize it and minimize it, if that is something that you like. I do a lot of stuff with just the four up. So if I just make sure that this is all good, and I'll paste. So Control E, Control C, Control E is center, Control C is copy, and Control V is paste it. Now a little extra tip here, right? You can see that when I'm pasting this, it's like getting, you know, off grid, which is very annoying. So if you do Control C and Control Shift V, we'll paste it in place if you want. Start of center of original or group copies. You can do lots of fancy stuff, but here's the thing, I just like pasting it in place. Wow. I think you can also hold shift and drag. Yes, shifting and dragging will allow you to copy an object as well as you drag it. But yeah, just quickly do that. Control Shift, Control C, Shift V. Paste it in place so it doesn't go off the grid. Wow! 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 It's a box. So I think the last thing to do here, right, to finish this beautiful little box, is again Control E to center, Control C, Control V. I don't mind things being off the grid, it's fine. As you move them on, it will be back on the grid. So here we are. We have this little box with our little guy in it. They're trapped forever in this level, and that might be what you want. So I'm just going to Control S and save this. You will find that Hammer++ comes with all of these like little prop libraries and things. They're basically zoos / libraries. You can just find all of the items there if you want. Enclosure created, yeah. A map source, whatever. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Where am I going to put this? Should I just put this in like desktop? Or put it in here? TF2 maps? There should be things here to allow me to say new folder. But I guess I might just have to use a little button instead. Maybe just tools. Put it in tools, test map. Congratulations, you have a test map. I think one of the first things you might want to look at, right, when you have this, I'm going to Shift Z to maximize the 3D view. Yeah, you've got all of this very bland texture. So what you might want to do here is bring up the texture browser, or Shift A, or this, whatever works for you. I like Shift A because I've used this for way too long, and it's in my muscle memory at this point. And this brings up the face edit sheet. So yes, you can browse textures to find interesting textures that you like, but you can do more interesting stuff when you have this up. When you have this up, you actually have this different tool that allows you to select these things. And this is why I don't want to change to this, because if I change to the camera, the texture application view goes away, and that's very annoying, which is why I use the arrow keys to look around and WASD, the WAS keys to pan. See, that's why it's useful. Because you don't need to select the camera tool and then unselect this. Right, so now you can select things. How do you apply a texture? Well, there's lots of ways, but the most simple and common way is to just browse to a texture that you like. So I'm just going to change it to a different dev texture at this point. I'm just going to click this texture. It's now selected, and I'm going to apply it. Apply it will apply it to whatever selected thing is. You can change this as like, you can change this to be like, okay, apply the texture. So when I click it, it'll apply the texture to that. Now there's easier ways, or faster ways, I should say. It's not easier, it's faster to do this. So a common thing that I do, and this is very, very hidden, and it's very useful which is very annoying, right? Is that an easy way to apply a texture is to right click on your mouse. That will apply a texture from whatever's selected here, right? I will Control Z again. But yes, there are easier ways to do that. You don't need to change all of this, right? Lift and select, lift. Lift just means you will put the texture into this this dialog box, right? There's other simple things like you can mark them, which isn't really that useful. It's like whatever. Replace you might want to use, so like say if you've used the wrong texture for everything and you want to change every single texture to a different texture. For example, I've made all of these walls this texture, and I'm like, well, I don't want the dev texture anymore. I'm going to replace it with a brick texture now. A brick texture, if I spell it correctly. And I will change it to our beloved white brick texture. Wow! Amazing! I think another thing to learn about these textures is that if I search for wall, you might start to see textures that you can see that there's definitely an orientation to it. Like, oh, there's a clear top part, there's clear bottom part. It's not very good for repeating, right? You know, such as these walls, these computer walls inside like a red base or whatever. A very common one I usually use, for example, is I don't think I can find it right here, but hey, I'll just use this texture here. This one here. Now this just happens to line up perfectly, but let's say it's not. Let's say it's more like this. And you're like, damn, this isn't aligned correctly to the bottom. I want the bottom of the floor to align there. You've got these quick buttons here to allow for that, right? You've got fit, which stretches it perfectly to fit that whole face, which is not good, by the way. You'd seldom use that unless it's like last resort, let's say. You can use the texture scale to change it. You can shift it. You know, this is manual XY stuff. Again, very silly, but you want a quick justification, right? So say bottom, I'll just press B, and it aligns the texture to the bottom of the face, right? So now it actually is aligned to at least the bottom of this face, right? But that's actually not where we want it, right? We want it here. And then I will just do this again. You've got left, you've got right, align it to the right, align it to the left, align it to the top, as in the top of the texture will align itself to the top. You've got center, which is centering the texture. You will find that this does a lot of stuff. You shouldn't worry too much about face and world unless you know more about that. This is just its relationship to the world or its relationship to the object. And treat as one is where you select multiple textures. For example, holding control while selecting all these textures will allow you to like treat it as a single piece when aligning it. You'll find reasons to use it, and it is used quite a lot. So I'm going to take this texture and I'm going to assign it all around. I'm going to go back into this with Shift Z and make sure that this is actually central. I think the other thing to check out, right? So I've got this guy here, right? And I was talking about tool textures. So if I search for tools and textures, you see all of these textures where if you assign something to it, it will turn into a special functional object. So if I select skybox, for example, and apply the current texture, which is a nice quick way to do this, which just applies this to whatever thing I have selected. It's a good way of just applying it to the whole block, right? Because when you're using the texture applicator, like this with Shift A, you can select individual parts of the face. So when you're trying to do more intricate things, this works better. So this bottom texture here, I'm just going to change it to like a concrete. So I'll search for concrete. I also cannot spell concrete. And we have this like this lovely basic concrete, which is used a lot in levels. And wow, look at this. It's a box. So what this skybox does, it will replace this and allow you to see the sky. If I go up to here, if I click on camera up here, I can change the view obviously to these ones that we know. But we can change things like textured or shaded texture that gives us different ways of previewing it. I like textured because it's light and bright and easy to see, but you can go like very specific, like lighting preview if you want, and you can click this bit here and try a full bake. But obviously there's no light, so therefore what's the point? This is again a Hammer++ thing. A lot of the base Hammer stuff, this is very broken and doesn't really work and doesn't really give you a good preview of the level. So I will just change this back to not 3D smooth. These are tool options. It's the same thing with light map grid. This will show you how detailed the lighting is on these things. Again, more of an expert advanced user type thing. Is very useful, but if you're making your first level, this is not something you need to worry too much about. As I said, textured is probably enough. That's probably all you need. Right, so we've got all of this stuff. We know it's dark because we were talking about this thing where you need lights in your level, and this is the perfect example of, if I just select the entity object and I'll just create one. Again, I've created another player, but I will click Alt Enter to open up the properties. Now you can again do it from like here. If you want to create stuff, you can, but you don't need to worry about it, right? So I will just Alt Enter this to look at the object properties. So it's whatever I have selected, it will select that thing and allow me to change that. For example, I can change the team. These things will come up according to what it is you've selected. So these things will be different according to what type of entity you've got. So I'm going to change this fella to an env sun. Sun? Hello, sun. And this allows me to say like certain things, like what's the color of the sun? I want the sun to be yellow and warmish, but kind of white a little bit. Yeah, that seems about right. Okay. And how big is it? Maybe I'll make it 64 units big. That's how big it will be inside of this sky. Here we are. Now, I've just realized something. What I've done here is I've actually created the env sun, which env means a visual side inside the environment. So this is actually what it will look like in the sky if there is a sun in the sky. Some levels have this, some levels don't. They don't need it. They might need it, but it's completely up to you. Anyway, that's not going to really light the map, but I will keep it there because it is good to know. Yeah, light environment is the sun. You can see, beautiful. It doesn't really need to be anywhere specifically. It just needs to be inside the level. This is a very source map thing. The idea of leaks and things being contained. So any of these objects that you make, you know, these entities the player starts, they all need to exist within this area. And this area needs to be sealed up. It needs to be closed and not have any gaps like this, because what happens is it tries to say, okay, this is the level, is it contained? And then it will do some calculations. It will find this hole that goes outside into the void, you should say, and it will throw an error when you try to compile it. So one thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that all of these things are tight and shut and leak proof. This would be fine, but if I move this out here, this would be a leak, because this entity should not be outside the level. So again, this is a particularly source type thing, and gold source. So it's an old concept. It's not really used anywhere else these days, but you will have to keep to that path. So again, right, this is the actual light, and I can apply things here. I can say what its ambient light is, I can say what its brightness is. I'm going to make it again, I'm going to make it like a sort of a warm yellow. Again, these are things that you can copy over from other maps. There's no shame in it. If you're like, I like the lighting of Dust Bowl, I'll take the light environment from that. I like the lighting from Cold Front. I like the snow lighting on that, like it seems cold. You can fiddle with this to get it right, but hey, if a map already has it, why don't you just copy and paste it, right? For example, right, I will open up Silverline, which is a level that I did a couple years back. And I can just search. I could literally search for the entity, but I think what I'll do is just find it, because it's usually all mappers will place all of those entities beside each other in the level for easy reference, right? So it's usually there at the start, or it's usually at the end of the level, depending on what level you're doing. So, where are you? Here you are. So you can see here, right? Tool brushes, remove tool brushes. So this is sort of a useful thing, right? Like the vis groups, you can make your own visual groups. This is a way of like grouping things together inside the level. You can make your own ones, but here's the thing. Auto does pretty much everything you need, and it's quite good to, once your level becomes more and more complicated, it's good to use these a lot more, right? Because like a finished level looks like a complete and utter nightmare to a new user, but the viz groups will allow you to help make more sense of it. So these tool brushes, when I was talking about if you make a block and you apply a texture to it and it become an entity that has some sort of functional use to it, you'll use a lot of those in the levels, right? You'll use it to create invisible walls, you'll use it to make trigger areas, which is an area that applies something. For example, this might hurt a player because they're running into the fire, right? This is what this does. Or cause an explosion, or be like a team respawn room, right? Which allows you to, you know, change your class and stuff. There's lots of these little things like this. You can see all of these different tool brushes used everywhere. But again, they are transparent, which allows some sort of usability of being able to make sense of the level. But as you use more and more and you start to like become more of a expert user and more of a you get better at these things, you will start to use these more and more, and you will get to the point where you go, I can't see shit. So this is where Viz Group starts to make themselves known as useful things. So as I said, all of these tool brushes, I can just click on this and it will just hide it. So now, you know, to a user, and your user, this looks actually, this actually looks like a level. Oh, okay, aside from some little bits and bobs that I can see and things that don't quite make sense to me yet. What is this? What does this do? What is this thing? I don't know. Right. It still looks more like the level than before. So if I go back to the sun, we've got the sun here. And if you go to a lot of levels that people have done, Valve levels, my levels, other people's levels, you'll see that this is a very common thing where I'm throwing everything on top of each other, right? All of these default / base level things. We usually group it into two things. All of the visual stuff of the level chills out here, wherever that is, it may be, and then we tend to throw all of the logic entities together. So these are all the things that define these are all the things that tell it's a payload map, you know, and what defines a win, like how long it lasts for. There's some sounds here, you know, for announcements and things like that. And we got some logic relay stuff here. This is an Easter egg, so I would not worry about being put off by that. But yes, all of the logic items stay together for the map, and then all of the visual stuff stick together. Now, if I was a more organized mapper, I would have made, or level designer, I would have put this with the logic, because this is logic rather than environment. And I would push them together, really. Just keep them all in one place all together for easy reference. But yeah, we've got a sun, a light, a shadow, a LOD, a fog controller, and a tone map controller. These are all environment stuff. This is to do with like the LODing, sorry, not a LOD, sort of how the color grading is done in the game. You know, do you want it to look more like a bright texture, blown out, like desert or something, or a bluish, crisp, snowy thing? You can use this, and you can point to the type of things that you want it to do. You can set the bloom, you can set the exposure, all of that stuff. These are all visual stuff. So as I said, there is no shame in just doing this. Hold Control, click all of them, Control C, and then just head to the other map and be like, Control V. Look at that. Get created, dork. So what I will do is I will actually delete the sun and light environment, because we already have one, right? But these are all of these things. Just take all these things, just deal with like the shadow, what the water looks like, what the fog looks like. These are all things that you can set. As I said, Alt plus Enter brings up the menu, and you can set all of these things, and they're all pretty readable. As I said, you can select help. You can find some more information about what all of these things do, but for the most part, it works straight off the bat without any sort of like special setup, other than just changing some initial values to what you think looks right. So if I go to the light environment, we've got the pick color, and this last value here is actually the brightness. 200 is fine. If I look at the previous one, it might actually be a bit brighter. it's 1,000, it's much brighter. So anywhere between 1,000 and 100 is kind of like a decent light from like something that's visible in some regard, where 100 is like a low light going all the way up to like 1,000, which is like very bright. So let's just say it's like 600. We're doing a 600 brightness. We can change the angle of it up here. Not very many entities care about this, but ones that have some sort of positioning and angling data that makes sense, you can change this and it will actually update it according to its use. For example, maybe like a moving platform. This probably makes sense about knowing which angle you want to place it. Right? Similar to a sunlight or a lamp or a light cone or something. This will all probably use an angle, so you can set it like this, or you can change it to straight up or straight down. It does give you that. So if I'll say the sunlight goes this way, whatever, and then I can set the pitch, right? Its pitch will be like 60 or something, which just means what it's was it azimuth, like what angle it's looking down, up or down, right? So it's like 60 degrees down this way, or 30 degrees, or 0. I think 0 is straight down, so it'll be the sunlight's being cast straight down into the level, like midday, and then like 30 and 60 and so on, right? So I've done that. So let's see if this thing actually works. I've got all of the basic ingredients to, at least as far as I can tell, make the map compile and go into the game, right? So you can compile with, what is it? What is the compile button? Is it just like run or something? Is run? It's here, run map. And it allows you to build it. Now, when you're testing something, I would select fast. Fast does a quick light, a quick vis, which is like visual BSP tree thing. It's like an optimization to make it run faster by saying which parts of the map can you see where, and if not, we'll try to make it not load because it's wasted work, right? So all of that stuff, you don't need to get super into the details, but if you're testing something out and you want it to run quick, do fast. If you want it to make it like final, you've got LDR, HDR, full compile, final, slow, right? That it's all labeled. These other ones, you don't really need to worry about it unless you have a particular reason to use that. But I just tend to do fast and select go. But the quick button is F9. F9 is compile. So I'm just going to do fast and I'm going to go. And that seems to be fine. So this should, when you run it, you can ask it, you can tell it to run the game after, right? Which is good for testing, right? You press F9, it does all of its compiling, it does the lighting, it does the entities, it does all of that fancy stuff. The more complex the map, the longer it will take, right? Very, very kind of common knowledge at this point. And you should just understand that. We're not going to get into optimization. That's much later thing. But yes, it will compile it. It will save it to the game folder in the map folder. It will load up the game and it will try to load your map. And if it loads your map, we're good. If it doesn't load your map, we're bad. I continue, test map, continue, select a team, whatever, and here we are. Look at this. Wow. Exactly, Scout. Woohoo. Woohoo. There's the sun. So that's the Env sun. where it's the actual physical environmental representation of the sun. And the sun is, I think, pointing the wrong way. I think it's pointing upwards like this, so it's lighting up the bottom, but it doesn't actually have a bottom, because that's the optimization, and that's the whole point of leaks, right? Why it's important is because it optimizes the thing by like culling all of these extra faces you don't need, right? Where did the block under this go? It's destructive, right? It takes the map that you've made in the editor and it does stuff to it, and then the finished BSP doesn't have that information anymore, right? It doesn't have information about how thick the block is that you placed. You know, it doesn't care. It just gives you 6 faces, and that's your map. And as you can see, the sky has been made because we changed that texture to a skybox. But yeah, the sunlight is not facing the right way. I should probably say minus 60, not 60. That means minus will be downwards instead of 60 degrees upwards. These are just the little things that you'll find out as you utilize this stuff a lot more. So for me, I have a lot of this just bound, but a simple one is no clip, and no clip allows you to fly around the map, which makes things a lot easier. And you just use it again. I bind it to a button, so it's simple and quick to just do that stuff. But yeah, that seems all gravy, baby. What are the last little things to touch on? I think there's a lot of room to talk about these things, and I'm only like, what, an hour 30 minutes into this video. You can see all of this compile information where this part here, VBSP, where it tries to make the BSP, this is where you'll find out if it leaks or not. This is it trying to be like, is this a valid box? You know, is this a contained area? La 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 la. And if it does, then it means it will move on to the optimizations, and it will move on to the lighting. If it leaks and you open this up and you allow things to leak out, it'll still compile it, but you'll start to see it looks off. It might be slow if it's a particularly complex map, because it will skip a lot of those optimizations. It will skip a lot of the lighting. It will simplify the lighting, right? Because you're sending out ray casting lights out into the void, essentially. So let me just quickly change this. I'm going to change this to minus 60. I think that's it. Oh, it says it here, help. The downward pitch, minus 90 is straight down and 0 is horizontal. So you want 0 to minus 90, essentially. That's what you want. I messed up, user error, but here, that's the thing. I'm not perfect. That's also good to understand. So I think what else I will do before I quickly test that again is I will shift Z back into viewing this area, and what I will do, a couple little things to help out, I think, which will expand your toolkit, is props and displacements. I can go into them in more detail at some point, but I think props is probably better than displacements, because displacements are like a Pandora's box, a can of worms. They're very good. They're very important. It creates the lovely terrain in maps that you see, this undulating instead of just flat, and it will, you know, bring your levels to the next level. But I also think that's like something maybe way down the line to talk about. So maybe I think what's better is to maybe just talk about some of these extra little tools here to like make more intricate details. So what I'm going to do, right, is I'm gonna pull this block out a little bit further. I don't really have a particular rhyme or reason for this. I'm going to copy and paste this floor because what I want to do is like say I'm going to actually make it a different texture, right? And I'll do this the same for these walls up here. You will learn down the line faster ways to do a lot of these things. And you'll get better at it as you go along. Control Shift CV, push to here, make sure this is unaligned. So when you paste these things, they tend to try and align to a grid point. And because I just picked this size arbitrarily, I will hold Control to multi-select, and I will pull this up to 4. So I know that when I copy and paste it, it will actually snap to the center a lot easier. So that means I need to pull this up, and I also need to bring this sky across. So one of the things I will say straight away that really helps us out is that I will pull the sky up. You want space, right? People are going to rocket jump, people are going to demo jump, they're going to sticky jump and get all, they're going to get all over your map so much. And maybe so here's the thing, right? You might Control C or Control V, you might hold Shift to do this. There's lots of ways to do it. I quite like Shift for the most part, and we've duplicated all of this. But here's the thing. I want to make this skybox more spacious, right? And it's quite literally a skybox in the literal sense of the word. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting this guy, right? Just to make sure that I can select that and it's available up here, because that means that I can use this apply current texture to a whole cube, a whole box at once. And I am going to apply it to this. And see that what that does is it means that now we've got this thing that these will all draw as the sky, but now we actually have some space. We've got some headroom. We can jump about, because otherwise we would hit our head on this previous skybox, which was here, right? It's quite literally all the space that we had, but now we've increased the space. And I'm going to quickly take this texture and I'm going to right click on that to select that. These are all just this texture. I'm going to Control S it. What I'm going to do is, because I said I was going to change the textures around here, I'm going to take ground. I'm going to search for ground. You can see all of these ground textures. When you see these two textures with these blends, these are actual things that we'll do with displacements. If you apply these blended textures that have these two different textures on it, which is what displacements can do, that you can blend between these two textures. If you just apply it to a regular face that isn't a displacement block, it will just apply the default texture. It will apply typically the top left or the bottom right. I can't remember exactly, but it will do one of the textures. So I will just say, I'm just going to take the dirt ground one, apply it. Lovely. And I'm going to Control and select all of these and left click. I'm going to browse for a cliff, for example. It's not really cliff, is it? What is it? Is it just nature? Nature. So you'll get used to this. You can take off the filter and just look through every single texture exists in the TF2 universe But you'll start to understand there's like little sets that exist, you know, like concrete, floor, ground, wall, nature, grass. You'll just learn these nice little groups that hold certain textures together. Where is a typical rock wall? I'll just do this, apply. So I'm not going to do any displacement stuff. I'm just going to use this as an exercise to show props, right? So likewise, I can do this. I can place this. But as I said, you'll use these buttons once or twice ever, and then everything else is just going to be clicking and dragging with Shift to duplicate it, or Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste it. You're just going to be doing that again and again and again and again to get your initial things, and then you're copying and pasting everything else forever. Or taking stuff from maps, right? Oh, what was the model that they used? Oh, I can't remember. It's the one that's inside CP Well. It's that train. What's that train called? Just open the level, copy and paste it over, right? Nothing wrong with that. No shame. No shame. So we have this team spawn, but really we want to make a prop. We want to make a static. We'll apply this. So these are like, these are showing you like what parameters, these values work and don't work when you're changing it from one entity to another. Again, don't really need to worry about that. You just need to click apply and everything will be fine and dandy. So the prop static will allow you to play props in the map or change this to a prop, some sort of mesh. And I will browse, and I will browse for a rock. Rock 3. Or is it rock 5? Rock 5? Yes. Everyone's favorite shaped rock. So you can see the rock, you can place the rock. You will sometimes see a rock and you're like, but where's the color that exists in this other level? You'll find that in skins, and this will tell you if there's other colors if the mesh has been set up, so you can see all of these different colored rocks. Same with this, you can see that snow-capped or not snow-capped and these different colors. So I will just use skin 0. You can change the skin here if you want to, and if I apply that, it's made the rock. And that's the size of the rock. That's the actual size of the rock. It's not bigger, it's not smaller. Again, this is a good way to get a sense of scale of a map. And I'll just hold Shift to drag it. I've got another rock. I'll go back to this one. You can, if you know the model by default, like off the top of your head, you can just type it in. But yeah, we've got a rock. You can see the collision mesh on this, just so you know what's actually colliding with the players. If you want, you can turn it on and off, but this is, again, this is what all of these are. All of these buttons here are really just display this, don't display that. You can see this CM, collision model, brilliant. You can see fade preview for the models. You can show the models in 2D, because if you go to here, you can see either the collision mesh, or if you turn off the collision mesh, you can see the detailed mesh, you know, the visual mesh, whatever you prefer with. And again, if you don't want to see it at all, you can just turn it this, right? Because you might find out that this turns this into a nightmare in specific levels, but that is up to you, right? That's what all of these little buttons are for. So we got some beautiful rocks. I think what I'll do is I will actually again increase this, just because rocks are big and it would be nice to make this bigger. Again, I like to use the orthographic views because it's easier to see, like, for example, sizes here, easier to line up things, whether things are on the grid or not. I am using this big grid because I am an adult and I can choose what I want to do. Now, I don't want to move it isolated. What I should do is I should select it together so it becomes a little bit easier to figure out what's going on here. Make sure it's nice and closed. So something that you'll start to realize as you make a map and you become better at it, and understanding and optimizations and little things that help you out, you'll get one of these little decisions here where you're like, well, if I'm going to make this wall along here, should I just do this? That works. But if you decide to make stuff in this map, it might, like up here where that is, this might become very annoying because you're going to have to like cut up everything. You might just find that it's easier just to copy and paste it and just make another wall here. And yes, you get this face here, but there's lots of other things to optimize this. If I just take this, I can make that like this. And for this one here, I'll do this version, right? These are both valid. And these are just things that you're going to understand better as you make your own level. I'm going to scale this over to here, like that. And I have this bit here. Again, this is one of these things. How do you call it? Like, how optimized do you want to be? How clean do you want to be? There's no shame in doing either. See, I can just drag that right over and it encloses everything, even though I've pulled it over a bunch of other parts of the map. Maybe that's fine, maybe that's not. You'll not know until you start utilizing this stuff. Right, so I'm going to make the rocks here. So one of the tools that you'll probably start to want to utilize is the vertex tool and the clipping tool. Now, let's give myself the best reason to use it. I'm going to take all of these guys and move it up with this. I'll press X to toggle through this. I'll bring this up here. Oh, wow, okay. Huh. What's going on here? I'm going to shift A. I'm going to left click on this texture here, and I'm going to right click on this texture here, just to make this a consistent texture and not a dev texture. How will I make this? Should I make steps? Should I make a ramp? Let's make a ramp, okay? I'm gonna shift and drag this over, right? Shift and click and drag to duplicate that. I will shift Z to go into here, and I'll box it out into like the sort of ramp that I want it to be, right? Maybe I'll put a ramp here. All right. Ramps and steps, those are the two things. There's lots of things you could do. So I'll do a ramp here. Yeah, how do I get the ramp? Well, there's two methods here. This is where you get the clipping tool and the vertex tool. They're both very useful, and they're useful for different things. But this is just a perfect example where both of these things become useful. You can click the vertex thing, and this will start to show what the vertex of the block is. You can... I don't know why that's doing that. You will find that your visual angle will play a lot on how this stuff works. Again, I tend not to use the 3D view for this. I use the 2D view because it's easier to line these things up. Yellow handles are the edges, and white handles are the vertices. If you see something turn red, it means that this is a degenerate face. This is an error. You don't ever want these faces to turn red. It's because these things are not aligned. They should be coplanar. What is coplanar? It just means that the angles are shared on those planes. So you'll find that it's easier to make things less, like break less when you're using the edges. But if you're doing this on these edges, for example, this remains coplanar, because if you break this into a triangle, these triangles, which is what it does when it compiles, if this triangle is at this angle and this triangle is at a different angle, they are not coplanar. They're not sharing the same plane, the same angle, and that breaks it. So if I was just to take this and move it up, this actually works, but you can see that it breaks the other one. But yeah, these things, I think this is actually both broken. It's just showing one of them that's broken, but these are both broken. But yes, you need to watch out what you're doing with that. But yes, this is one methodology to make a ramp. If you push things together, it will allow you to merge the vertices, but you will lose that vertex now, so you don't have the cube anymore. You just have this triangle piece. You won't be able to pull that bit back. The second way is with the clipping tool, which allows you to slice something. So it just allows you to draw a slice across it when you select it. The 3D preview will show you the slice if that's what you want, but that's a Hammer++ thing. You don't need to worry about it. So I've drawn a slice here, and that means that now you can click and drag to change the slice. If you click it again and again, it'll tell you which side it will remain. So you can see the red part here is the part that gets sliced away. This will disappear and you will be left with a ramp. Or you do this and you get a little bit on the top. That's nice. Or you can do other weird things. But it's good to try and keep it on the grid in some regard if you're going to do something like that. You can also left click, that toggles between remain, keep the bottom half, or keep the top half, or in this case this slices it. It keeps both of them. What happens if you keep Nexus asks, what happens if you keep invalid face geometry? Will it fail to load in the engine? Will it not show in the game, or is the behavior undefined? It will either one not compile, it will show it as an error and not compile at all, or it might not draw the faces, like it won't render them. It depends on how degenerate it gets. Best rule of thumb is don't make it happen. Don't do it. I don't think I've ever done it before, at least in at least a decade or whatever. You might catch it by mistake. You might actually accidentally like mess with the vertices on a really small grid, you know, and you know it can happen. It can happen by mistake. I think generally speaking, if you can check for problems with Alt P, but I think there's also a way to show problems here. And it will probably come up there saying that the faces are degenerate. But yeah, going back to this, I'm going to slice it, keep the bottom, press enter to accept that, and you can see there's a ramp. Amazing, amazing, comrade. Again, the other method you would probably want to do is this. I'm going to just shift move this and be like, I'm just going to make stairs and do this. Okay, these stairs are really big. That's not going to work. A player step height is 16 units high, and we are on 32, so I'm going to reduce this down to 16 and do this. And I will just duplicate it with holding shift and do that, and I'll delete this one because it's just a duplicate. Very weird, like very odd kind of harsh angle steps. Typically 2-to-1 if that's what you're doing, to make them a little bit nicer. But generally speaking, 8 is the nicest height to do them. But you can do this height. I'm being simple. I'm keeping it super simple. And I'm just going to texture some of this stuff. You can hold right click as well to do this, to texture quickly. I'm going to replace this texture, and I'm going to use the replace and just search for that brick texture. I want that white brick texture that I did earlier on, and do this one. There we go. Just because it works nicer as an outdoor one. The other one's like an indoor one. Right, if I quickly do that thing that Nexus asked with the messed up geometry. So if I take this and I do this and I take it, you can see it's red, and if I do Alt P, we can say we've got an invalid structure. Invalid solid structure, point off plane. The solid has invalid structure, probably as a result of vertex manipulation. You can try and fix it, and it will try to coplanarize it. Like, you can see that this looks like the same angle, like this plane is on the same angle, but as you can see, it ends up possibly just breaking it. If I search, apparently no errors were found, but yeah. It can try to fix things, but it might end up like breaking things at the same time. Like, it looks like in order to save that, it's had to merge these verts together, and now you just have this weird shaped object. I'm going to delete that. So here we are. We've got a ramp, we've got steps, we've got rocks as props. I'm going to shift and drag this along. I'm going to Alt Enter this to bring up the object properties. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to search for a railing. Tons of railings, but we've got all of these railings that, funnily enough, it's not railings, is it? It's handrail. Handrail. So we've got all of these nice generic ones, like the 128s. We apply that, and we can see it here. Now, what is snap to bottom? Did I? So I've manually done this, and this is in Hammer Plus. Plus, there is a setting to make it so, like, yes, this will snap automatically. I don't need to do anything magical here. But this is something that was in Unreal Editor, and I really liked it, which was snap to floor, which is basically it takes the object and it pushes it down until it hits the floor. For me, I've bound it to end, but this is something that you can define, and I think you can just go into properties, and this is the properties of the map. No, that's just the properties. That's just the properties, sorry. I'll enter, right? That's just the properties of this object. Oops. I'll enter. Sorry, I did not mean to be that confusing here. There is a way to set the tool options, and there's the keybind editor. And you've got all of these things, and I think I searched it. Is it tool? Where's page down? Page down. Nope, it's not that. 3D. Mainframe. Edit to entity, to world, toggle group, snap to grid, move to floor. See, there we are, end, and move to floor aligned, which will be move it to the floor and then snap it to the grid. But you might find, like, if you have an uneven floor, like for example, you do a displacement and you're doing a nice little like a nice natural ground, you might find that that's more useful there. But again, this is like a little bit of an aside here. I'm just going to make this prop here, and I'm going to move it so it's sitting there. Yes, it's a little bit off the edge, but right, that's the sort of thing that you can fix. That's the sort of thing that you can fix once you start to like add more detail. Right, when you're doing like a block out, you want to keep everything simple, because you'll find out that when you play test it and you mess around with it, you'll be like, oh, I don't need those railings, I'll just delete them. Oh, I'm going to move these railings here. Oh, I'm going to move this ground or whatever, right? You don't want to commit yourself and worry about the tiny details in the level so soon. You want to make your entire level like a broad brush stroke with large pieces, and then you go, then you bring down the grid size, you could say, and then go over with a finer tooth comb, and then you bring the detail down, you bring the grid size down again, and you go over another detail. You do it in layers. You do like nice big heavy block out, and then you start to define a little bit more of the details with a smaller grid, like, oh, I'm going to build the doorways, I'm going to build make these walls thinner and construct these things, and start to put holes in the walls for windows and things, and then you start to place the props more. You start to make more props, and then you start to make the props like more like how you would finally want to like align them, all of that stuff. So I'm just going to, again, it's whether you want to do it 3D or not, but if you just select left click on this stuff, you can rotate, you can switch through the different handle types for different editing types, and I'm going to rotate these around like this. And this is just another example of like, maybe I just want some railings. So we've got a ramp that we made with a clip brush or the vertex brush, if that's what you want to use. These other tools you don't need to worry about at all. The decal, this is not used anymore. We use overlays, which are the same thing as decals, but a little bit nice, like a bit more powerful. This is just doesn't work anymore. It's not really used anymore. You would just use an overlay. It's the same thing. It's like creates a sticker on the wall. It's used for posters and signs. The reason why an overlay is better is because it allows you to drag it around to bend things. For example, you want to make a road or something. You'll make lots of stickers like this, and then make a road out of them. Again, so an overlay uses the texture system, and if I just search for a sign, you've got all of these signs here. I'm just going to take this one from freight, blue freight, and if I just click it here, there we go. It's just sat there. I can go back to the selection tool, and then it just treats it like an entity, a point entity, and I can do this. I can right click to go through these tools, but I'm going to press X, that changes it to the in-world one. Not the in-world one, like the orthographic handle types. So I can move it around here, and I can see, like, can I just scale this so it reaches top to bottom on this guy? Like, okay, this might work. But again, this is up to you. You can move it around. You can hold Alt to come off the grid, or likewise you can make the grid smaller in case you want to do finer on-grid adjustments. But again, I'm keeping it on 32 or 64 just because it's a block out, and you want to keep it really simple. And the only reason I'm not doing it here is because, well, I am just showing some examples immediately. This is the stuff that you would do very, very late on in a level. You basically, you do things according to their size. You might use this earlier on because you're like, I want to do big signage to show where the red base and the blue base is. And because it's a big object, you're treating it like a big object, you might want that in sooner in the level than later. That's what I say. You start with a large brush and you make the brush smaller and smaller and smaller as you finish the map more and more. Broad strokes first, and then you start to make it smaller and smaller. But you use the broad stroke to finish the entire, like to make the entire map, the layout first. Right? You gotta remember that. Alright, I'm gonna save this, and I'm going to press F9 and do a quick compile. This all seems good. Let me change it to this. I am afraid that we'll get like parts of the VOD blocked because of songs, particular songs. I'll close this. I'll bring it back up into Team Fortress 2. We'll be able to have a look at what the map looks like with a little bit of color, a little bit of lighting. You see, it took just a little bit longer, just because now there's some models in there. The map's a little bit bigger. There's a little bit more complexity to it, so it takes just a little bit longer to compile it, and a little bit longer to load it. So we've got the sunlight. The sun is obviously in the wrong location, right? No? Yeah? No? Yeah. Yeah! But yes, you can. Medic! Wonderful. Wonderful. And we should be able to get out these stairs. And we got a ramp. Look at that. Fantastic. Here I come! I don't really know what else to talk about right now. I think that's like a good starting point because you can make a lot of the game, a lot of the level that you want to do with these things. I think the last little thing that I kind of want to talk about, do I want to talk about displacement? Displacements are like very useful, but I think I need to maybe make it its own little lesson. I think the thing that I would probably want to do right now is just show the concept of making a room connect to another room, and how would you do that? You know, like, what is the best principle? Well, if you're going to make another room, right, just I'm shift dragging, making an object out here. Let's make it just like a little bit smaller or whatever. This is where you start to realize, like, how are you aligning things? How are you the grid size and all of that stuff? You're like, how am I going to put a hole through here, for example? You start to ask these questions. What I will just do is just duplicate all of this stuff. So now it's everywhere, and then I will make a roof. the next thing that I will do is just make a light. Again, I'm just placing this basic fella. I will Alt Enter, press Alt Enter to bring this up, and then I will just make a light, which is just an omni light, as in it just casts a light everywhere. Like it emanates outward from its position. If I want to make more direction in it, I'll use a light spotlight if I want it to make it like face one direction. This just shines it out everywhere from this point here, and this will be fine. I just need to press Alt Enter again to just look at its brightness and color. 200 is probably fine, but I will just make it 400 just to be a little bit safer. And I'll just place it here so it's on the grid. I will save that. I will browse to another texture. Might as well change the texture. This is where this one would work a lot better, right? Because this is like in the base. I will apply it. I will make sure it is aligned to the bottom, and then I will right click on all of these things. And then what do I do for this? Well, it's a ceiling, right? What's a ceiling? There's nothing. What's another name for a ceiling? A roof. No, that's the wrong roof. But you'll find it. There's not really much more there. So concrete is probably the best for a roof texture. Maybe this one is typically quite a oft used ceiling texture. So we have a wall, and now we've got another wall. How are we going to do this? Oh, it's really thick. Oh no. So I will Shift Z and go back to this. This is the other very useful use of the clipping tool. If I'm going to make a hole in this wall, I will probably like slice it like this, and then left click again to just toggle through what option, and I'll slice it. And then I'll do another slice here. It's a door. It's starting to look like a door. Then I'll get this selection and select this piece and just drag it up. Oh, now there's a door. Oh, but there's no floor piece. That's fine. We'll just Shift drag to duplicate and just do that. And now there is a room connection. And this is where you start to find the wall thickness and the grid size start to become more palatable as a thing that may be an issue, you know? Either, right, maybe you make I bring the grid down to 16, right? That's the thickness that I was saying, and you start to treat things more like the size that you want to do, right? And now you've got to do this, and now everything's getting a little bit more accurate and a little bit more fiddly. I'm going to select all of these things and move it across. There's that. If you see this Z fighting, a skybox will probably take priority over this roof. But at the same time, I would probably not have the roof that high. I would probably have both. But here's the thing, right? If you have a roof here, even if you do this and, you know, you bring this you move this so this is the same thickness here, you might realize, well, if there's a roof up here, maybe this building is taller. Maybe it's like, you know, I scale all of these things up, right? Oh no, I want to scale all of these things. Well, that's annoying doing this. Again, this is a good reason to use a vertex tool, because now I can vertex tool with all of these, and then I can click and drag over this, press enter, and then I can just pull this all up by itself. And what's to say that the skybox can't get involved, right? Pull this all up together. So now it's like, okay. Starting to feel like maybe this is a bigger building and this is a smaller building. And if you're wanting to start to include parts of these buildings as like details, you're like, okay, well, maybe I, you know, bring the sky over here like so, and I'll bring the sky and squish it here, pull it back. We've got this bit here. Okay. I'll bring this up a little bit and then flatten it down to here, and then pull it across. You know. Now there's a roof on here. Damn. Okay. Well, let's make it an angled roof. Should I use the clipping tool? Should I use the vertex tool? You know what? Pick whatever you think works for you. What I'm going to do is do this. I'm going to shift A and then left click on this, so because I want to change the texture. Maybe change it to a roof texture, for example, maybe like this. Ooh, that's cool, but this is not a good texture. This is, I think, this might be for a mesh. Metal, I think. All of these roofs, these metal roofs are there. Like, these metals are sometimes used. These metals are sometimes used. There's these ones, right, as well. Let's just say I'm going to use this one. Apply it. Wow, a basic texture. And it's starting to look like a building. I know it's blue, but it's also red. You know, is this a blue building? This is a red building. You know, is this neutral building? You know, do I want to just use like this texture instead? Yeah, maybe. These are all the things that you start to realize. Like this is, you know, it's a little bit extra detail, right? It's more than just the simple room that we had that was just a cube. Things are starting to form out. And we've got this bit here. We've got this door. And you're thinking, okay, we've got this door. Maybe we'll just use this brick texture to form the door. I'm just left clicking, then right clicking, left clicking, right clicking, left clicking, right clicking, just to get these different textures. But it's looking very like immediate. Now, a common thing to do here is to just use a prop doorway. Control Shift, Control C, and Control V over, Control C and V. If I Alt Enter to go into this prop, I might find that there's a door frame or something. Oh, there's a couple of door frames. These ones will work. Yeah, I'll pick this one. 4. Okay. Let's Shift Z, Control E to center. Oh, it's not quite the right size. Might have to look for a different one. What about this one? Okay, maybe this one's all right. And you'll start to see that these things start to like force you to use a little bit more detail or not, or change the grid size, or you know, these are all different door frames with different sizes and requirements. And you'll start to realize as you have props that you're like, oh, I've got to fit the map to the prop. I've got to move this over here, and then I've got to move this over here. Again, I'm switching between using this stuff here, up here or down here, and you start to see that you have to like, oh, change this now and change this now. Yes, this is a method that you would use. Another way is to just simply be like, I'm going to just texture this something differently, like again, a metal for like a trim or something. Like this is a common one, like the I-beam texture. You know, maybe you do that. Maybe you put this with the trim. If I search for trim, you might find this trim texture, and I apply that. Oh, it's the wrong way. How do I do this? Just rotate it. Just type in 90 degrees and then center it or top, just to make sure that it's all aligned. You know, you might do it yourself, or you might use a mesh, right? There's these two ways, and if you want to go an extra step into the detail, you might take this and copy it in, reduce down the size like this. I'm going to push it in like this. I'm going to, if I alt right click, I can I think it's right click, right? Oh, shift right click. Shift right click applies it to the whole block. So this whole thing is now textured that. You know, so I might do this, and I will align it up with this, and maybe that's a little bit too thick, so I will bring down the thickness to 8 units, and then shift drag it over to make that, and then shift drag, make a top bit, and now there's you know, made my own doorway instead, right? Because then now I can make the doorway what I want it to be, right? And now I can do little things like, oh, I can make some detail out of it, right? Maybe I want to do this, and then like put some glass in there, right? If I do this, and then make it even thinner, right? Go to the 4 units and browse. I'm going to browse for glass. And then just use one of the glass textures, like this one. Apply. Maybe I want the one with the safety stuff in it. I think it's these. It is. You know? And when you ask, so the thing is that you need to start realizing is that at this moment you're starting to create detail. And this is an important thing to understand. What is detail and what is your base geometry? You know, I would say that this floor is a base geometry and these walls are base geometry. And then things like these stairs, I would say, is more like a detail. And this is a start into optimization. Because as the map compiles and optimizes and figures out what can see what, it will use all of these to figure this out. Even though they're very small and they constitute as detail, it will start to figure out, can I see this part of the map through this? And you start to like waste. It starts to get slow to compile. And when you make these details, you should start to consider making them function details. So if I take this and I press Control T, this will make it an entity. It's basically like this. It's the entity tool. This block is now an entity. And thankfully, by default, func detail is the most common one. And it is the one that is basically, it's the default one that it turns it into when you select a block. So I talked about point entities being, you know, its point is essentially a point on the map, and then it creates the entity. Where a tool block entity requires this entity to be applied to a block. If I select a block that hasn't got it applied, it just says it's a solid wall. What this will do, a func detail, it will basically do all the nice things as much as all of these walls get. They get lovely lighting. They get baked in. It doesn't reduce the quality, so you don't need to worry about that. I'm going to do it with this one. I'm going to do it this one. I'm going to do it with this one, and I'm also going to do it with this one because it's a piece of glass. What it does is that it marks it as something that doesn't get used in the compiler when it's used in this, when it's used for like visually calculating. You'll realize that you've not made a lot of converted stuff to details, because this will start to take very long if you don't do this. And that's just a rule. It's just another little rule that you got to know. You got to make this detail. But like anything, I've made this detail. I'm just going to, copy and paste it in the future. I need to make another door frame. I'll just select all of this and copy it over. You can, like in this point now, you're probably going to take all of these objects and then press Ctrl G, which allows you to group this together in a nice loose group. Let me just make sure that I do it proper. Ctrl G. Belong to a group. Group them. I think do I not have ignore group? What's happening here? Yeah, it's in a group. So now these are all a group. I can press Ctrl U and that will ungroup them. It's basically a soft group system. So I will do that and that allows me to group it. If I press Alt Enter, it will try to tell me what it is. But when you're selecting multiple objects, it can get a little bit dirty. You can do ignore group, which will, this little toggle here. This is ungroup, this is group. And then you've got like merging and carving and stuff like that. I wouldn't worry about merging and carving too much. But yes, you can select these individual things. The only thing is that when you ignore group, it also ignores entity if it's in an entity. So you want to make sure that that's not turned on. That's not turned on when you want to find out if this is a group or not. So I mentioned a detail, right? Because how you should be thinking about this is base geometry should be big, square, and chunky. And it's important to remember that square, as in like orthogonal, and chunky, and defining of the map. So a previous example, this roof is an angle. That's something that we don't want to be calculated in the map, for the most part. Now this isn't quite, I would say, detailed enough to ask for it, but it is good practice to be like, well, I'll Control T this. This is now a func detail. I can use I can use this automatic viz group that we talked about earlier and be like, well, let's turn off all the func details. Now a func detail, the benefit, it doesn't get calculated in a vis. It doesn't like slow down everything. I will also turn these stairs into it. I will do it into a func detail. When you select multiple objects and turn it into an entity with Control T, it will group it together. This is now an entity. This is one entity versus this, which is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate entities. If I press Control T again, I can just turn that all into one single entity instead, because then I don't need to worry about ungrouping it. This is all just grouped because it's an entity. So it's methodology. I don't think there's one wrong or right here, but generally speaking, when it comes to things like these detail groups, you could go either way. I like to individualize it because then it becomes easier to, like, if I do ignore group, it can become a little bit easier to like select and move things about and copy things. But again, it's methodology here. I will make sure that this ramp is also a func detail. We have all of these other things, but this is things like, you know, like doorways and things like that. Things that make sense to be like a big block that you move. But the issue with Func Detail is that it doesn't seal a map. It doesn't stop the map from leaking. You know, when we're talking about we should make sure that everything that we're making here can't get out to the outside. Like, imagine if this was filled with water. Would the water leak out? The water gets stopped by these blocks. However, it does not get stopped by details. Water will flow. If you think about this water analogy, water will fill this up as if this doesn't exist, like this. This is how the compiler will see the level, at least in terms of visibility. Now, if you saw, we've got an issue here. This will leak. It doesn't matter that there's this bit on top, because this is a detail. This is a detail. It's a functional detail. This is an entity. Entities do not stop a map from leaking. Now, we can just bring it back into the world. We can Control-Shift-W. We'll just turn it. It will say, you're not an entity anymore. You're now just a block. I think there's a move to world, I think it's called. Move to world. Or tie to entity. That was the thing. Do you want to make it a func detail to optimize? Well, now you've got this issue here with this. It's not stopping a leak. Or do you want to just keep it on the world and seal it? But now you have this angle that slices up the world more, because that's what happens. This world gets sliced up according to this geometry. So when you have, if this is in the world, it will slice up the world like along all of these points that it's in contact with, and it can become a big mess. But yeah, I would say at this point, this is on the cusp of could be detail, could not be detail. But if you decided to make like a little flat bit of roof here that had a little bit of thickness to it, you know, if I did this, for example, if I go Shift Z to go back into here, right? And let's say I shift drag this up. Oh, Shift W is also snap. Turn off and on snap. Yeah, that was going to scare me. If I just select this and see if I do this and I make it, you know, I make it 8 thick, and you know, it comes off the roof a little bit like this, and it comes off the roof a little bit here as well. You know, just like any roof, right? It has this sort of like thing where it comes off the roof, like any other roof panel that you might know of. Do you know of any other roof panels? But say, yeah, you start to, I guess you should ask yourself, is this feels like this is actually making detail as opposed to it being a base piece of geometry? Then you should be like, okay, maybe I should make this a func detail. So let me just move it to like that. And you can see here, oh, it looks a little bit more detailed now. So you might say that, hey, if I was doing this, I would say that, hey, this is going to be the world. This is going to be world geometry. I'm not going to make this detail. However, I'm going to make this detail. So I'm going to Control T to turn it into a func detail. So that ties it. Control T is to tie to an entity, because we have Alt Enter, which is check properties of an entity, much like this or these. This is not an entity. These are entities. You can see as it comes up with an actual class. But this is a func detail because we don't want that to affect we don't want this to slice up the world along this axis here and along this axis here. So this will call like a slice along the world like this. It will, you know, make all of these areas that has to be calculated by the vis system. That is what it's for. So I will turn this and I will hold shift and right click, which will just make this whole thing the same color. So now it looks like an actual part of the geometry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a quick compile, check it out, have a look at this, and then what I'm going to do is touch on one more thing, and then I will finish up. A 2.5 hour video, I think, is pretty decent. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is going to be demonstrated in this. So here we are. We've got the map. It's got its lighting baked. We increased. I'll reduce this down a little bit. And I've got that extra space, right? Oops, that's not good. Bot quota. Yeah, bot quota 0. You can add bots if you want, but you know, we increased the roof, right? We pushed the skybox up, so we have that space that we can move on to. We added these steps and the ramp. These are now details, which is an optimization. The same with this roof over here. Medic. And we have this little room that we made with a doorway, and we've moved it into func details, so it's not creating main geometry. So you'll start to see things like maybe the size is a little bit small. Really, I made the top of this frame. The top of this frame was really what the doorway size should have been, and instead the glass part should have started upwards from there, for example. But you know, these are the little mistakes that you make as you start to learn how to make a level and get the sense of scale and things like that. This is maybe more of a corridor. Does this continue going down to another room? Does it split in two? Does it go? Is it a spawn room? I don't know. These are all of these decisions that you want to make. So this is the last thing that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a tool brush, and how those work. Now, the first one that you probably looked at is the skybox. Right, you applied this texture that has a special functionality built into it, that when you apply it to a surface, it says, hey, when you compile this is going to be the sky inside the game. There's another one which is clip brushes, which will stop the player, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. So we've made this detail, we've made parts of the map which are about, you know, making the map look interesting, but we might not want it to be playable area, right? You might want this to be a playable area, right? This is the decision that you get to make is the mapper. You can be like, maybe I want players to get up here, and I'll put a med kit up here, or there'll be some windows in here that people jump out of because it's a control point map, or it's a capture the flag map, or whatever, right? The world is your oyster. But maybe you've decided that this roof is actually something that you don't want players to get up to. So how do you go about and do this? And that is another function of tool brushes. And this is one of the more important tool brushes that you'll use. It's basically one of the tool brushes that you'll just see everywhere, right? And it's not difficult. It's not more difficult than this. It's not more difficult than making the skybox. We're just going to apply a different texture to it. So if I just Shift Z, I'm just going to bring this over like this and just cover that area and say, this is the area that I want to block. All right, this is what I want to block. The only thing is that now I go to the texture application or Shift A. If I have this block selected, when I press Shift A, it will have it all pre-selected, which is very handy. And I'm going to browse over to Tools again. And what I want to look for is Player Clip. I can just search for Player Clip as well. And I will apply that. And that has done the thing that I was saying. This is basically an invisible wall. Bullets and things will fly through it, rockets will fly through it, grenades will fly through it, but players cannot go through it. If you want it to block bullets and everything like that, you can change it to a full clip, which is an invisible wall, but it also blocks bullets, it blocks rockets, it blocks projectiles, you know, it blocks props. But generally speaking, if we don't want a player to get there, but we want things to get past there that's not a player, you will use a player clip. Now, one of the things that's going to happen here is that while I've placed the clip brush here, this is coming out of the clip brush. So that means that we'll be able to still walk across this. There's two things that we can do here, and this is up to your decision. Either you get down on your knees, you bring the grid down to the same exact level of this item and match it completely, and then match it exactly completely to this. That is one method. Another method could be, and maybe you'll use this, it depends. This is more like if a roof is really far away or something, or really high up. You might do this. You might actually Alt Enter and turn this Funk Detail into a Funk Brush, which will allow you to do other things, such as you can make it not solid. Which means that nothing will be able to hit it. Now, the reason why this is questionable is because if I say shoot a grenade up there, the grenade will actually go into the roof a little bit. It'll actually go down into this little bit under here and roll along there. So again, these are the decisions that you make. If you want to be even more, you know, again, it's the level of optimization, the level that you're willing to go in to make this detailed. You don't need to make it always to this level of intricacy and correctness, because this might be something that you decide, how far is it over the map? How high is it up on the map, you know? Like, it doesn't matter if the grenade goes into the roof a little bit. The grenade is never going to come back down because it's so high up, you know? There's all of these little decisions here. And it's all just according to speed and efficiency as you're making the level. You might want to make it very, 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 very specific. And I will put, I will start to clip this if I press it. That I can clip it along here and then select Control Shift W to change it into the world, right? And then slice it along here. So basically I've got, what I've made here is I've made the piece that it's perfectly aligned with this and the pieces that actually come off the edge. What I might do here is actually make this piece the invisible bit, the funk brush, with no solidarity. A scab, you might say. And then this part is the funk detail, the solid piece. And if we want to go further with this optimization, I'll select all of this stuff and I'll press H, I'll hide it. You can press U to unhide. So it's like quick hide and quick unhide. These are all the detail parts. But we still have this face here. We have this face here. This will still get rendered, you know, despite all of that detail there, because this is the solid geometry. And this is where we will do something like no draw, which just means that the face doesn't get drawn at all. It's invisible. This will just be invisible and there's nothing drawn here, and you'll just be able to see what's behind it. And you're going, well, why would you want to do that? Well, it's just an optimization. And as we unhide everything, because we've got all of these pieces on it, that will make it, you know, that will cover it. And I will say the last little things before I sign off with this beginner video into making your first TF2 map is continuing with this idea of the player clip. So we have this ramp here and we have stairs here. It is good practice to just say that stairs are ramps functionally. If I just shift and drag this to copy and paste it, and then I will shift Z and control E to center, what I will do is I will push this along like this. And if I look here, we've got the stairs here, and we want it to, like, this ramp to match the stairs like this. And then what I will do is you can either block bullets 2, important. Bullets 2 is the one that you use, not block bullets 1. This is old and broken, unfortunately. I found this out the hard way on Steel when I updated it in 2023 in the summer update. This messes with the vis, which is wild, and this should not happen. So they made another one called Block Bullets 2. But yes, either you use player clip or block bullets. It depends on how much you care about grenades and rockets being swallowed up by stairs. Do you care about it? Do you not care about it? Do you want your grenades to hit the stairs and, you know, not roll down? Or do you want them to roll down kind of weirdly, unrealistically? It's up to you. I'm just going to use player clip and do this. And this will basically just make it act like a ramp, and when your player runs up it, it doesn't do like a weird jerking motion from the third person angle and all of that stuff. But it's up to you whether you care about, if I press Shift A, whether you care about it being a clip or whether you care about it blocking bullets. You know, these are two valid ways. The pro player will say this is what they always need to be and there is no other way and reason why. There's reasons to use both. But again, as you're making the level and you're trying to get your feet in a feel, this is good enough. Don't worry about this stuff until you're done with the map, until you're ready to play test it. When this idea becomes important is when you place it, right? When you're just figuring out, should I have a ramp or stairs? Should I be able to get here? Is this what the map is supposed to even be like? Is this the layout that I want? Do not care about these things, right? I am taking an unconventional method just to show off these examples. And one of the last things is player clipping to improve some of these situations. So if I snap this to 8, right, you might end up doing this to make this look nicer, right? I wanted to pull this in a little bit so it looks like it's not hanging off the edge. Use the smaller grid to pull it in. This is something that you've started to do in the later stages of the level. The problem is that you'll be able to jump on this side from here, and you'll be able to push alongside that. And maybe that's something that you want, right? Again, these are the decisions that you get to make as the mapper and the level designer. But maybe you're just like, maybe I should make this simpler and I want to block it off here. Again, you do the exact same thing as this. You use a player clip and you use it to simplify collision where it's necessary. Now, a nice little thing that you can do is if I go into this view here, if you've selected a bunch of objects here, you might actually find it useful to make a block tool, because a block tends to match the selection of the thing that you selected last. Typically, not always, but typically. I guess it's not. I guess it's not going to. You know, it might, but sometimes it just don't. Anyway, what I will do is I will just take this piece of geometry and I will shift drag it up to copy it up. And I will do this. It's up to you to how much detail that you find the collision, but typically you should make it a little bit over what you want it to be. And I will do that, and then I will do a player clip. So you can see, like, oh, this is how it affects the player versus how it affects the objects and other things. Now there is this little bit. Players will run on top of that, but again, this is the thing where you decide, like, how detailed do I want it to be? Is that an important thing? Do I actually do this? And then you can do this other thing, which is if I select this. So this yellow collision is a player and collider collision. It's like a full collider collision. If I select both of these and I'll enter it, I can actually select what sort of collision it uses and how it works. What I might want to do is just actually make it not solid. And this will just not collide. You will see that its mesh turns purple to say that it doesn't collide. And that's something that some people might want, where this railing still collides the player and it still acts like a railing. But say if I shoot or something, the rockets won't hit the railing. Again, it's another decision that you make as a level designer. So I will quickly compile this just to show off those things, and then I will finish up this little tutorial. Will I go on further? Maybe. Maybe I'll do another lesson or two, because there is important things like displacements. Displacements are pretty interesting, and maybe some more lighting stuff. Maybe. But I think when it comes to what is the minimal knowledge that I need to make, you know, a space inside of a map, like inside of a level, and test it and try it out and see if I vibe with it. I think that's enough. So let's just quickly check this. So yeah, you can see that this doesn't feel off, you know, but it means that I can't jump up here. I'm like, oh no, but it also means I can do that. The rocket's not going to hit that mesh. You can see that this is also smooth as well. Basically, stairs are ramps. You should think of that. Stairs are ramps. It's just how you want to visually communicate it. So this stuff is not solid, I think. Yeah. And if I do this, I can't get up it, and I can't get onto that lip. But it's also good because this lip doesn't stop me. So if I decide to, you know, do this, I'm not going to get caught on it. I'm not going to get caught on that little lip there. I don't think there's any other things to really chat about right now. But yeah, things that I would fix obviously is that this should be higher, for example. You can see that the light here is doing its thing. We got a little room, and we've got this outdoor bit. I think the next bit I would be chatting about is how do I get this area to look more natural, and using displacements, which is a way of taking these blocks and turning them into like paintable terrain. And I think that would be really interesting and exciting for people. All right, let me just quit this and I will finish this up. Will I be on later to play game? Possibly. Possibly. But I think that's good. I think that's good. All of the basics to get your stuff in order. All right. I think I will finish up. For the time being, I will need to get dinner and all the other stuff that would be fantastic to have. Hell yeah, this is the music I want. So I will probably cut that part out and highlight it. And it would be good to show people who are like, I want to make a TF2 map and I literally don't know how to use the editor from zero.